Far so good, everyone. Not too difficult, I hope. So today we have an unusual session. It nearly got cancelled because of all the drama and danger and emergency warnings on the news, and for most people it's pretty off-putting. Most people just pull the covers over their head and go back to sleep again on a Sunday morning, especially when there's so much danger out there. Then it's a pretty good excuse not to bother with meditation this week. But the fact that we have quite a lot of members who still came anyway, because why not come and meditate in the rain instead? And it adds a new sort of feeling to our practice. So we are doing a hybrid today, which is both online and in person, and we have people following us on both channels. But the talk I want to give today, it is coincidentally about obstacles and gremlins and the sort of things that crop up seemingly when your mind is full of great intentions for doing positive and well-intentioned things in your life, and just at the point where you're about to get down to doing those great things, what you find is that even greater obstacles than you ever experienced before now seem to be clustering around you and really making life difficult for you. Almost as if by just putting yourself out there to do something good, you are attracting all these extra obstacles into your life. And it's somehow connected with what I have been discussing over the last few weeks in terms of spiritual transformation, that when you put yourself out there to make some changes in yourself or in your life, it's like you somehow are painting a big target on your back for all the possible obstacles which can come now and get you, maybe more than they ever tried before. Almost to the point that there's an expression out there, I think it comes from Oscar Wilde, that no good deed goes unpunished. It's like if you didn't do any good deeds, then no one really cares about you. But ever since you started doing something good in your life, there seems to be no end of possible obstacles coming up. It's really quite a mystery for those who are not familiar with the way this game is played. Yeah. So for convenience today, I'm calling these things that come to get you. Only the good people it comes to get, like the badly behaved people, it just leaves them to destroy their own lives in comfort. But for the people who are trying to do the best things in their lives, they're really going to come for you. I'm calling them gremlins to make them sound a little bit more palatable, but really they are not very savory at all. And even the best of people come across these things. In fact, you could say they reserve themselves for the best of people. And at this point in our spiritual cultivation, where really we are getting down to a practice, then if we come across some of these obstacles, then we will very easily get put off. It's like you think to yourself, that's not fair. I'm being a nice person here, and how come I still have problems in my life? So we are turning the question around here and saying, look, when you do start to make some improvements in your life, you can now expect there to be extra large obstacles in your life because you are attracting them. It's almost like they are seeking you out, especially. And if you go out on the ocean, then you have to expect the waves. If you go out of your house, you have to expect Hurricane Hilary. There are bound to be the things which are going to crop up. But forewarned is forearmed, right? If we know to expect these things, then somehow instead of them putting us off from our good intentions and our good work on ourselves to improve ourselves, we can somehow say, and put a name to them. And it's somehow a lot less depressing for us. So this is a pictorial representation of no good deed goes unpunished. Yeah. So within our meditation tradition, even from the tradition of Buddhism, they have a special translation for these things which I'm calling gremlins, and they call them maras. Ever heard of them before? Maras. But we call them gremlins, just to keep it a little bit light. And it's said that even the Buddha, meditating under his Bodhi tree, he got them. So, like, who are we not to get them, okay? And you remember how they turned up? What different forms they came in to try to put him off from his efforts to get enlightened? I thought it was on Netflix by now. No? Oh, they had beautiful singing and dancing ladies coming to tempt him, for example, to try to put him off his meditation. Usually pretty effective, actually. And then it didn't work, so they had a whole army of them coming and threatening his life and so on. You must have seen the movie. And he put up his hand and they all shot these arrows at him and they all turned into flower blossoms in the end. So it had a happy ending. Yeah. But more generally speaking, they tend to divide these ones, and they don't always come in quite spectacular forms. They often come in the form that really pushes our buttons the most. And they can be custom designed to really push your buttons. Yeah. So whatever gets you, whatever riles you up, they will generally come in that form. And if we're trying to track down where do these things come from and what can we do to deal with them, because we know they're going to come for us, especially if we try to behave ourselves, sometimes they come from the inbuilt weaknesses in our mind. Sometimes they come from the inbuilt weaknesses in our health. Sometimes they are things to do with our bad reputation or blemished reputation from our past catching up with us. Sometimes it comes in the form of other people in our lives who really seem to have it in for us. And sometimes it comes from weaknesses in society at large. But to make it a little bit more personal, these maras or gremlins come in the mind, so in which case we call them kilesa mara. Sometimes they're health weaknesses, in which case we call them khandha mara. Damaged reputation, sometimes known as abhisankhara mara. The gremlins personified are Devabhuta mara, and the fear of death, or death itself, because that's usually pretty effective, Majjhumara. Haven't scheduled away yet? Well, we have some funny pictures to entertain us as we go along, although I'm sure that if you saw the real ones, they would not be quite so cute and cuddly, okay? So weakness in our mind, generally this is what we are familiar with when we're trying to meditate. Even just mentioning obstacles in the mind, the thoughts that crop up, the distractions that crop up, really you could say at base these are maras. Just when you thought your meditation was going well, here it comes. It's the mara coming to stir things up so that you have to go back and start your meditation all over again. If you want to say what these are, then another word for them is defilements in the mind, or taints in the mind, or poisons in the mind. We are familiar with the three categories of greed and hatred and delusion. Yeah? That's what you could say they are. And generally speaking, in meditation, then we try by various methods to overcome those hindrances in the mind. We have different ways of overcoming them. For example, sleepiness. Now we try to wake ourselves up a bit in the meditation instead of succumbing to sleepiness, for example. Otherwise, the sleepiness would be a Mara to overcome us and make us fail in our meditation. But they can also track us down in real life, like outside the meditation, and they can sometimes rear their ugly head in various temptations that might be put in front of us to sort of abandon our good sense. Let's say you've been going strong on the wagon of your 12-step program, and someone puts a bottle of beer down in front of you. You could say that that is a Mara, come to upset your good intentions. Yeah. So by having patience in the face of temptations, which means patience to say no, basically, although it's not easy, you'll be able to overcome them. So that's real life Maras. In a more subtle form, sometimes it comes when we don't use our intelligence to the full when making decisions, but we allow our decisions to be swayed by, again, those little taints in the mind, those Maras in the mind, succumbing to maybe things against our better judgment, like bias or prejudices, for example. I won't go into too much detail today. So that's all in the mind, but Maras can be there. But they become more obvious to us as we meditate more deeply. Second sort is to do with our physical hardware. So just now it's the software. Now we come to the hardware. Some people find it easy enough to do good things, to set an exemplary example in life, and to cultivate themselves for the better. But our ability to do this is severely reduced as our health deteriorates. And when we're young, we tend not to think about this. We just do as much as we have the energy for, and usually have quite a lot of energy. But as time goes on, I'm afraid to say that the energy becomes like a little bit less continuous. We have good days and bad days, and we like to put our energy into things that we have energy for, maybe in a more selective way. But those good days become further and farther between as we get older, and things which we used to be able to accomplish easily become harder with time. Some people think, oh, when you're really old, you get good at meditation, right? Calm down a bit, 1 foot in the grave, you're to be pretty good at meditation by now. Yeah, take everything as life comes, acceptance. But that's not the whole story. Actually, it becomes harder to do the things which we used to be able to do easily. Just sitting still for meditation for an hour, as you get older, oh, those aches and pains really start to creep up on you. Sometimes you need to visit the restroom more frequently, so you cannot sit for meditation for as long as you used to be able to. Sometimes you can't see the monk clearly, or there's tiny PowerPoint presentations. It's like, oh, I need to have binoculars to read that now. Your body is gradually getting worse as time goes on. The things you used to be able to achieve, they get harder with time. So part of the way to avoid this is maybe to accept it, maybe to put up a little bit more effort in spite of the problems which you have. But apart from that, you should be quite careful about your health, and certainly not do the things to destroy your own health. Some people take pride in that, really going out and getting themselves trashed. I'm sure not in this audience, but some people take a pride in just like sleep through the whole next day without registering anything at all, waking up on the Monday morning. Oh, yes, that's generally not a good way to go if you value your health as one of the most important things which you bring to the equation, bring to the table in terms of your spiritual development, because it does require strong health. As I mentioned last time I saw you, you can take on more if you are still in strong health. If you are in less good health, then you need to possibly downsize your goals. So don't let the Maras downsize it for you. Third one is to do with reputation, or things which maybe you have in your past, which even though you may choose a better way of life in the present day, but sometimes your past can still creep up on you. Say you had a guy, he used to be a little bit of a gangster, a guy called John, for sake of argument. But later on, he straightened his life out. He became a much more upstanding citizen. But unfortunately, the nickname stuck. And when you say, oh, do you know John? And I say, no, I know lots of Johns. Which John do you mean? Oh, John the gangster? It's like, even though he's become a reformed guy, but they still call him John the gangster. So he can hardly get away from his past. Some people are compulsive liars. But later on they say, oh, telling lies is really bad, so I'm going to try to be more truthful from now on. But people just remember you as a liar. So no matter how hard it is for you to tell the truth, people don't believe you anyway, because they remember the old image which you have portrayed. It's hard for you to turn that around into something better. Some people can find that off-putting, because it's like, oh, people are not even giving me a break here. So why bother? Why bother to change? So it's going to take you longer than for a person that maybe is a complete stranger. But apart from being patient and keep going anyway and trying to break through to the other side, sometimes a particular consideration is your choice of livelihood. A lot of people's perceptions depends on what you do for a living. So if you are in a sort of livelihood where people trust you, then it does help to shorten the length of time it takes for people to trust you and to reestablish your reputation. So, any livelihoods you think you should avoid? A used car salesman? Oh, sorry. Yeah, so truthfulness, it's sometimes very hard, but it does make life a lot simpler in so many aspects of cultivating yourself for the better, or trying to influence or change something for the better in society. Yeah. One more, sorry, two more to go. Ooh. I will keep some time for questions. There are people who seem to have it in for you, who seem to make it their life's work to make your life difficult. I hope you don't have such people in your lives. But up to now, it's all been something to do with us, right? But sometimes it's like other people who are like out there seem to really have it in for us. And they will just plague you at every turn. Sometimes it's not particular people, sometimes it's just your surroundings. For example, you try to meditate and there's this person with a muffler off on their motorbike who just wants to only to try out their motorbike when you're trying to meditate. Or it might be mosquitoes. Like for me, this is a particular one, especially if you've been to Thailand, you'll know that they have extra big mosquitoes in our main temple in Thailand. Like temple branches only have really small ones, but in the main temple they have to have like really big ones. And sometimes they seem to come just when you're getting into a good meditation. And the strange thing is sometimes they are imaginary as well, because they know that it doesn't have to be real to put you off your meditation. It can sometimes be like you just think you feel a mosquito and you happen to have your eyes closed and you can feel it biting you, and when you really come to look, there's nothing there. So what are known as the troublemaker Maras, they're onto you, and they come in the form which really will push you off what you're trying to do. So you can try to reach out to those people if you are feeling particularly generous, to try to influence people in a good way, to have a better demeanor towards you, or maybe to be more accepting of the fact that you're trying to do some spiritual work on yourself. Yes. Yeah, one word for gremlins, which was introduced to me when I was teaching in Georgia, was some people call them their teachers, which sounds like very generous for people who made that much trouble in your lives. But sometimes if you realize people are pushing your buttons, then you now realize what buttons you have. So in fact, you're learning an important lesson. A little bit like the question we had on anger last Sunday. What can I learn from anger? Anger is pointing out a need in you or some sort of lack. So actually, the feelings of anger, although you maybe shouldn't act on them, they are teaching you something as well. So all of these things, they are valuable if you know how to look at them. One last one, death. Well, yeah, death usually stops people in their tracks pretty definitively. So you could say that that is one final trick that gremlins can pull on you, which you're unlikely to be able to escape from. Nonetheless, some people are overly afraid of death. They say, oh, I'll be bored to death. I'll be boiled to death in the hot weather. I'll be washed away to death in Hurricane Hilary. So they don't do any of the normal good things. So sometimes it can be the fear that actually puts people off rather than the travesty or the danger itself. The good news is that by being a meditator, sometimes we can put a slightly more realistic perspective on things like death. And you might say that even meditation is almost like a rehearsal. What do you do? Sit very still, close your eyes, your breathing becomes more shallow. Remind you of anything? And it's almost like you are exploring that territory. So when the time comes, you feel somewhat more prepared for letting go. So in a way, that is a way of preparing yourself. Apart from that, being earnest in the things that you do and not having excuses about doing things to the best of your abilities, for example, sometimes can push back the fears of all sorts of things in a way that this whole fear can become less influential in our lives. Otherwise, you can become afraid of everything. You end up doing absolutely nothing in your life. With these 5 sorts of gremlins, it's said we can put them into 2 categories. On the right, we have the ones that come from ourselves, or maybe things that we have under our own control. Weaknesses of the mind, so it's in our mind. Weaknesses of our health, which we try our best to minimize. Weaknesses of our own reputation, and how we respond to the imminent of death in our lives. And only on the other side do we have troublemakers who perhaps we can say is someone out there, nothing to do with us, although some people would argue that if you hadn't done it to them at some stage, then they wouldn't be trying to get their own back on you. So there is a tendency when bad things happen to us, when we've been trying to behave ourselves well, and still there are things which come up as obstacles in our life, to point the finger and try to blame it on someone else. But in fact, by pointing the finger at other people, there are still 4 fingers pointing back at ourselves. And this is the similar sort of proportion of things which possibly, if we were to try to look at ourselves to see what we can change, 80% of the time we can change something about ourselves to ameliorate the situation rather than blaming it on, oh, that person's got it in for me, or that person is making my life a misery. So we do have a way to reflect on Maras in perhaps a way that is possible for us to change something in ourselves in response to those Maras where possible. So if we do come across such obstacles, especially when we have our clear vision ahead of us of what we'd like to do to change something in our lives for the better, to transform ourselves for the better in some way, to meditate more, for example. If we know that these things are going to come for us, then we can turn around that no good deed goes unpunished into the idea that obstacles are there to be overcome, even regarding them as a challenge in some cases, or better still, the fact that this obstacle has come up means that I'm onto something here. The fact that these things are, for some reason, cropping up. How come it's only the Sunday I teach meditation and the Monday I go to a Susa library that they have this rainstorm coming here? Oh, it must mean that this is really worth doing. Yeah, I don't have it any other day of the week, just these 2 days when I happen to be teaching meditation. Why is this happening? But now I take it as a compliment, because yes, what I'm doing must really be angering the Maras, so that they're coming out in force today. So this is actually something where you can turn around what would be off-putting into something which is actually quite inspiring, that I'm going to overcome whatever it takes. And an interesting thing about the Thai language, or at least the Indian languages, where a lot of this technical terms for self-cultivation come from, is that they have a special word for obstacles in the Indian languages, which is upasaka. And if you take that word apart to look at the literal meaning, saka actually means heaven. Upa means close to something. So obstacle actually literally means closer to heaven. So if you look at it in that way, it means, oh, I've got an obstacle to overcome here. Oh, I must be getting close to heaven. So actually you can turn it around into something which is quite inspiring for you. I have a few little announcements just to finish off with today. If you're new to meditation, I hope you understood it well, and you now have a technique which you can take away with you, perhaps to practice more regularly. And I will say that practice does make perfect. You shouldn't think one meditation is going to solve all the problems in your life, but you get a method, you get a taste of something which hopefully you can integrate into other aspects of your daily life in a way that it will become your regular state of being, or practicing on a daily basis, so that meditation becomes a part of your life. And a way to do that would be to look for maybe a slot of 20 minutes in your day when you can sit down to meditate uninterrupted in a way that would be gradually integrated into your life. And in that 20 minutes, you'll be able to go further each time you meditate. You may have good days and bad days, but as long as the Maras don't get you first, little by little you will see an improvement. Be first thing in the morning, last thing at night, be in your lunch break. But if it's regular, then it helps you to remember to continue with that. There is an app which you can download onto your phone on Android or iOS for free, called MindGem, which is linked with our organization, which has last count, about 200 tracks on it, most of which are to do with leading meditation. So you can listen to a meditation track which is of a length which is suitable for you from your favorite monk, and you have different approaches to getting to the center of your body. Yes, exactly right. So it should be free. I think there's some sort of glitch which someone is trying to charge you money for it, but don't pay money for it, okay? Yeah. So that is available there, and it's good because if you're offline, then you can still listen to it. It also has a timer on it as well, which some people find useful. Here at Susa, we have class every Thursday evening between 7 and 8, and also Sunday morning, which we're now on, is between 9 and 11. Tomorrow night, just to celebrate the tail end of Hurricane Hilary, we have is it between 7 and 8? I think it's between 6 and 7, isn't it? Can't remember. Yes? Just check. I think it's between 6 and 7. Yeah, it's 6:30 to 7:30. It's once a month, but September is there's not an event, but we would continue then in October. 6:30, right? Yes, I think 6:30 till 7:30. Full moon event coming up on the 30th of August, which is here. It is a transmission from Thailand from some of the monks who are full-time dedicated themselves to meditation research. So they are particularly good at answering questions and giving you the latest version of the meditation practice. I also do a special session on the every second Sunday of the month, which goes a little bit deeper on Buddhism and a slightly longer meditation for those who are interested. We're following through the Mangala Sutta at the moment. Next time we get to the Four Noble Truths for those who are interested in what is the deeper meaning of those. So that's Sunday 10th of October. We have an outdoor candlelight, and the rain will have gone away by then, I'm sure, with no more Maras to interfere with our efforts on the 23rd of September. And last but not least, I have opportunity for answering some questions, which today keeping on paper because we have also a live transmission as well. So, okay. Dr. Sunil, welcome back. I too was away in Peshawar, border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. Wow. Are gremlins resulting due to one's association with an environment they are born to? And that says Pati Rupa Desa Vasa. Yes, especially the Deva Buddha Maras. If you are unfortunate in your choice of human surroundings, it can make every good deed which you do much harder to achieve success in. Let's say you're born in a family where no one encourages you to do good deeds, then you will probably give up your efforts much more easily than a person who comes from a family where it is encouraged. So let's say you have a mother who encourages her little child to meditate right from an early age. Of course, the child will grow up with at least a familiarity and an understanding. Whereas if they grew up in another family where they are punished for meditating, it would be much harder for them to do that. So choosing, in as far as you can choose your surroundings, this would be a very important contribution to reducing the number of Deva Buddha Maras in your life. But if you're an adult, really going one stage further than that is working with outreach and social skills, not just accepting your Patirupadesa, your amenable surroundings, but actually making your surroundings more amenable. And this would be a lot to do with things like the work in our temple to get out there and teach people to meditate, maybe wider than simply within the temple, to change society in a positive way, in the hope that there will be less Deva Buddha Maharas out there in the future, and only just Deva Buddhas would be much better. Yes. And second question, what kind of chanting do you teach? Can I learn and when? Chanting is generally part of the Buddhist tradition. So on a Sunday morning, we tend not to emphasize things like that because some people find it off-putting when they maybe come from a different religious tradition. Give you an example. We've got a children's activity every Saturday afternoon, and some of the parents wanted us to teach their children chanting. So I said, great idea, why don't we have chanting? And then some other mothers and families said, oh, we don't want chanting, we only want meditation and like stories or something like that. So it's like, okay, so how am I going to please everyone here? So yes, we do have chanting. Generally, it's part of the daily temple routine. So, for example, right here at 6 o'clock every morning, we have what's known as morning chanting. And we have chanting books. Some of them are in English as well. You can look for them online if you are interested. So we have morning chanting, usually at 6 o'clock in the morning, evening chanting, 6 o'clock at night. and they are in the Pali language. But each country has its own a way of doing chanting. But this is the way it's done in Thailand: morning service, evening service. So if you're interested, I can show you a book of that. In fact, you can take one home with you and chant along with. They have it on YouTube these days. So that would be a good way to learn. Some people chant by reading it out. Later on, they can learn to memorize it, and it's a way to sort of internalize that knowledge, especially if you know the translation of it. Some people have even gone as far as to call it a sound chanting as well, because people find it quite calming to chant. I've even known some people who are not Buddhist, but they like the sound of chanting to the point that they do a little bit of chanting before they meditate. It puts them in the right mood. So it is quite a positive thing, I think. It shouldn't be seen as a sort of particularly a thing that's only relevant to, let's say, Buddhist people. Yeah, hopefully that answers the question. One more, okay. I have no buttons. Gremlins are tests. Nothing has power over us. No Mara or Gremlin shall prevail against, period. Peace be restored. So it's good if you have no Maras. You may be more fortunate than the Buddha, because even he had some Maras. But yes, but he's so if you are at that point, I say sadhu and well done for you. But sometimes even just the attitude that there are no gremlins that I cannot overcome would be also quite sensible as well. But sometimes it does take a trouble. And if you have less, then maybe you are more fortunate. Maybe you have better outreach than most of us. But I think generally you tend to notice things you would never dream would come and interrupt you, only turn up at the very critical moment in something that you are intending to do. So yes, look out for them, just in case you haven't really got down to your practice yet. Yeah, but on paper if you can, and then I can read it out for the people who are online. Have you got some paper? Got some paper, someone, please? In theory, you can get rid of them all completely. This is a project of very high-level meditation. Get the Maras at the source. But generally speaking, that is quite a tall order. Yeah, if you start to go up against the Maras, then they just send more to test you. Yes? Yes, go on, please, if you have it on paper. Here we go. How active would you consider yourself? You are as a monk towards our evolution. So your evolution? My evolution? Okay, so there's always a balance to strike with being a monk. How much effort or time do you put into your own evolution? And how much do you put into helping other people with their evolution or the outreach, for example? Is that the question? So from temple to temple, it differs. And there are some monks who really do withdraw from society in order to work on themselves. Within Buddhist tradition, it's not possible to withdraw completely. You cannot just shut the door and grow your own vegetables. You're still reliant on other people to bring food. So you can never be 100% all on me and ignore the rest of the world. But there are some monks, what are known as forest temples. They do tend to go 90% for their own spiritual destiny and maybe 10% for teaching for others. But in our temple, it's about half and half. I'd say sometimes we have to put our own meditation on one side in order to help out other people, or to do that outreach, which is necessary to sort of give back something to society. So for monks, it's often down to a personal choice, or at least a policy of the temple, how much effort you put into those two aspects. But it would be wrong to abandon your own spiritual training in order just to help other people. That would be seen as a misplaced use of energy. So you might say, oh, this monk's always on the phone, helping out this person, that person, they've got no time to meditate anymore. It's not really the point of being a monk. Okay. Self-evolution or humanity evolution? Well, this also is a good question. Have you heard of Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism? So really, self-evolution and humanity evolution are both good goals to have. But it's a question of which one do you do first. And within Theravada, like the old-fashioned sort of Buddhism, the idea is, generally speaking, that you fix yourself first, fix your own oxygen mask first before helping others. Why? Because if you haven't sorted out at least some of your own problems, what do you have to offer other people? Mahayana often puts it the other way around, and they say, discover yourself by helping others, by being selfless, by going out and really throwing yourself into social welfare work, helping other people, making the world a better place. In doing that work, you will discover, by really sort of giving of yourself to others, you discover who you really are. You get rid of your ego. And that way you come eventually back round to self-development. So there are two ways, but eventually they lead to the same thing. It just depends which one do you want to start with. But there are many Mahayana organizations in Buddhism where they really are involved with social welfare work. Like, for example, Suchi Foundation, they raise so much money for social work. I think they don't have any time for meditation. But one way or another, it will lead them back into discovering themselves. So it's down to your personal style of practice. But here we tend to fix our own oxygen mask first. Okay, Dr. Sunil again. Troublemakers. If anyone who speaks or writes about the truth and the nature of things, contrary to the accepted norms, beliefs, or upbringing, is causing trouble. Socrates is a good example. Okay. Yeah. The poison pen. The poison pen. Poison pen. Yeah. Most of us, we can only change the world like one step at a time because we only know so many people, or can only be in so many places at once. But people who change like the whole, well, let's say they have a greater web of social followers or whatever, who have hundreds of people hanging on their words, or waiting for their message, or they're going to believe anything they say just because of the nature of their popularity. They are in a much more difficult position where they, because of their popularity, they really have a greater responsibility to be careful about what they say. So I don't know if Socrates has like good and bad points, I'm sure, but yeah, there's some questionable stuff in there too. If they influence people to change their view of the world in a negative way, then they are, however many times more more culpable than a person who just works one person at a time. So if you are working through books or through media or through social networks and influencing a lot of people by every word you say, you should be that much more careful that every word you say is actually true and influencing people in a positive way. So, yeah, for example, if you are a monk, you have to be especially careful what you say, because you're not just giving your personal opinion anymore. You're actually representing a whole like tradition in the words that you say. So you have to be maybe a lot more careful about what you say as a result. So if you lead people into a problematic path by what you're saying, then you are also responsible for their problems too. That karma comes back on you. Yeah. So be careful if you are involved beyond simply the words that come out of your mouth. Yeah. There's a lot of philosophy in general. It's very problematic. Even Buddhist philosophy is often very problematic. And you can find all shades of meaning there. Like from just like downright ridiculous to quite sensible things. And some way, if you take it in the wrong way, you can end up like committing suicide or something. It's like, it's completely the opposite of what you'd expect. So yes, it's very helpful to find your own truth first before you start to interpret other people's ideas. Yeah, because there is some quite destructive ideas out there. Yeah. So for today, that's probably quite enough. We still have a lunch ahead of us, despite the weather. But I'll be around if anyone wants to ask anything individually afterwards. Yeah.
Please bow to our teaching monk. Bow. Bow. Bow.
So may all of you enjoy freedom from Maras, but if the Maras do come for you, may you be able to recognize them and overcome them easily.